always inspires her audience with her discussions. Our speaker is blessed with 2 kids. One is 5 years old and the other is 2 years old. And despite this, and despite her busy schedule, she makes sure that she finds time for her children, for she believes that there is no substitute to parenting, to being the first teacher of children, to being a mother. Ladies and gentlemen, it is with pride.
Remote learning or distance learning amidst the pandemic. Okay, thank you, Sir Dean, for that very lengthy introduction.
There are at least 1,000 more watching us on Facebook Live.
Oh, okay, so this is Facebook Live. Okay. So let me share to you now my PowerPoint presentation, if I may. So I was tasked to discuss parental role or the role of parents in distance learning. So I actually have only 31 slides, so I wouldn't really be boring you with a lot of PowerPoint slides because I think you have already been overwhelmed by so many information from yesterday's Zoom workshop and this morning's Zoom workshop. So I hope that if you have questions, you will not hesitate to raise your hand. Although there's so many of you here, so maybe some of you could just comment in the chat box and then our moderator can keep track of the questions so that we will have a more interactive discussion of the role of parents in distance learning. So since Sir Dean already introduced me to you earlier, yes, I am a parent of a 5-year-old kid and a 3-year-old kid, both of whom should have already been in nursery. But my 3-year-old child, I decided not to enroll him yet because of the difficulty of distance learning and because I didn't want him to experience his first schooling in such, setup. Kasi diba, education for preschoolers should serve the purpose of socialization. So I think because he's only 3, I can do home-based education for him while waiting for next year to arrive, hopefully with the situation being better. But with my 5-year-old child, I didn't have any other choice but to continue with the enrollment process. So now she is enrolled and classes will resume this August, I've heard. So when I was doing my research about the role of parents in distance learning, while I was doing the related literature, I was in a way trying to put myself in the situation of other parents. I was trying to imagine what it would be like for them to be involved in distance learning and how can they be an important element in the success of the implementation of distance learning. So there are many things to consider. In fact, I was quite happy that I was given this task kasi parang I needed this opportunity also to reflect on what I can do as a parent myself. So I think many of you can relate to what we are going to discuss today. So in terms of DepEd having this initiative, I think one of the things, like for example, in terms of institutional readiness, one of the things that teachers are going through right now, or the challenges that they will be going through right now is in fact still related to the K-12 system, diba? Kasi we just adapted the K-12 and we're just trying to cope with it for the past 2 years. So it's a new curriculum and now we will be challenged once again with somehow the same curriculum but a different setup because the academic workforce right now is shifting away from the brick and mortar of the school setting to our personal working spaces. So how do we deal with that? So I think many teachers, school heads, principals would say that the number of students they have increased. Okay, ano man, why would they increase? Because before they only deal in their face-to-face instruction, they deal with um, their students, of course, age learners who come to school every day. So they are the stakeholders. But now, parents are also number one students. And I think we'll be very happy if the parents wouldn't be the ones doing the homework for their children. We have very eager parents. So these are some of the challenges that we are going through to experience. So, okay. So the outline of today's topic, I actually have 8 important topics to discuss. We start with the curriculum of the home. If we have a curriculum in school, we also have a curriculum at home. Second one is the routine of family life. Third, equally important, is the parent-child relationship. And then family expectation and supervision, as well as homework, school or home communication, parental involvement, and family or school relationship. So these are the 8 important things to understand in the concept of parents and distance learning. Okay, so let's begin with the first one. What is the curriculum of the home? Of course, when we have a certain curriculum, for example, at school, when we implement a certain curriculum, we have learning outcomes. We have curricular outcomes. And when the child is enrolled in a particular program in school, the teachers already know what they are going to provide for the child to learn. So the child follows through the curriculum, and the teacher is able to monitor the child's progress. Is she able to comply with the requirements? Is the child able to perform uh, and practice the skills that is expected for her? So that is the curriculum at home. And if the child cannot perform all those things, then she is required to repeat, diba? Repeat the process. So we also have a certain curriculum at home. And uh, studies have shown that these patterns, the curriculum is actually comprised of patterns identified at home. They contribute to a child's ability to learn in school. So, according to research, the curriculum of the home or the patterns identifiable at home are in fact even more important than the child's socioeconomic status and even the child's innate learning abilities. So, in a way, a child is able to overcome these external factors, diba? That impedes, let's say, one's uh, climb to educational success or ladder, because of a very supportive and warm curriculum of the home. So, what comprises the curriculum of the home? Okay. So studies have positively linked certain family practices with a child's success in academic learning. So these family practices are the three. These three. You have first parent-child relationship. Okay. So parent-child relationship, how do parents and children in the family interact? Of course, we're using singular here because each child has a different level of interaction with each and both parents. Diba? Although parents would say, I do not have a favored child, or I treat my children fairly. Diba? I treat them all the same. But the child's personality interact with the parent's personality. And when these two are combined, it creates a different parent-child dynamic. So how do parents relate to their children? And in turn, how do children relate to their parents? The second one is the routine of family life. When we say routine of family life. How does the family spend their time together when they do spend their time together? Um, so here we can also see in the routine of family life, you can somehow guess or gauge the economic status of that family based on their routines, diba? When you check on the child's daily activities or weekly activities, you will know how they are coping or how well they are doing. When the COVID-19 pandemic started, one of the important coping strategies we would always highlight in our mental health and psychosocial support is being able to establish routine. Kasi somehow, when COVID hit us, our normal routines have been disrupted, di ba? As school head, as principal, as teachers, our daily routine, it has been affected because, for example, in the morning, you wake up very early, you prepare for work, you go to work, you meet your students, you discuss whatever it is, you give them seat works, and then you deal with your colleagues, and then you work on some important documents or paperworks, then you do your lesson plan, and then you go home, you spend time with your own family, deal with your own personal life, and then the next day wake up again to do the same routine. So if you've been teaching for, let's say, more than a decade or 2 decades, then now your routine has been severely disrupted. It's not like we haven't experienced um, class suspension before, di ba? We did experience class suspension before, but not to this extent that we've had no classes, face-to-face classes for more than how many months? 3 months, di ba? And more. Now, waray na talaga. There's really no face-to-face interaction, but we have, or if we could have, if we have blended learning. But for totally distance learning or remote learning, then our daily day-to-day lives have been disrupted. So such as also in the case of the family life. For students, they have been used to preparing for school, going to school, and spending most of their time with their friends or with their classmates than of actually spending time at home. So now they are spending time at home. So the family dynamics is quite affected, especially if the parents are working, or if the parents have little children at home to deal with, and now with another added burden kasi na iba ng schedule, then their routine can change and can be affected, and can also affect how the child is coping with um, distance learning. The third one is parent expectations and supervision. And we all know how to deal with parents who have very high expectations of their children and who also place the same expectation towards the teachers. Diba? If they expect their child to perform this this grade or this high, they also give the same kind of expectations towards those handling the curriculum. Okay, so these three, regardless, as I've said earlier, regardless of the parents' level of education and the child's socioeconomic status or the family's socioeconomic status, any family will have a curriculum of the home. So meaning to say, um, each child will have different family practices. So in a way, remote learning or distance learning somehow personalizes learning. Diba? Kasi you have to understand, oh, what are these family practices that will affect how my student, for example, will be able to increase his motivation to learn the material, or how this particular student, given his family circumstances, would be able to respond to remote learning. So any kind of family will have either a positive or negative parent-child relationship, a positive or negative routine of family life, or a positive or negative parent expectation and supervision. So we're saying that if the curriculum of the home is positive, then any kind of impediment will be uh, ignored, diba, by the child, because the child will definitely move towards the educational ladder of success. So this is somehow a message of great hope, because we're saying that regardless of all the odds, the child will be able to succeed if the family is able to provide a very stimulating, learning oriented environment. Okay. So let's start with the first curriculum of the home, and this is the parent child relationship. So we can have a quick survey, for example, for our parents, or if you have children, you can also reflect on this, whether you have daily conversations about everyday events, okay? Whether you are comfortable expressing affections, or whether both parties, both parent and child, are able to listen as well as speak. So here, we're talking about the last one, the third one. We're talking about the power dynamics between parent and child. Of course, as a parent, and because we are Filipinos, in the Filipino family setup, the parent usually has the upper hand. Diba? The parents make the decision for the child. The parents impose certain things on the child. And the child in the Filipino family setup, the typical family setup, usually listens, because listening is a form of paying respect, and abides the rules of his parents. So the child listens but is seldom given the chance to speak. So that's one downside. How about expressing affection? Iba-iba. There are families who offer warmth and affection towards their children. So it really also depends on the parenting style being used. If it's an authoritarian parenting style, the parent is strict, overly strict, but provide less warmth and affection. So very strict, high control, but low warmth. So there are negative implications for the child's behavior if you use authoritarian parenting. If it's authoritative parenting, balance. You have high warmth, high control. You have certain rules, you have you have limitations or restrictions for your child, but these restrictions are equally balanced by letting the child feel that they are loved and cared for by the parent. The third one is neglectful parenting, which is the opposite now of kasi pwede high warmth, you provide all the things that your child needs, but low control. Diba? So yung neglectful parenting and indulgent parenting, wherein you spoil the child, will actually have also negative implications for the child's behavior. So again, in terms of expressing affection, how is warmth balanced with control? The first one, daily conversations about everyday events. We will be discussing this more thoroughly later. Okay, so this one. Children benefit from a parent-child relationship that is verbally rich and emotionally supportive. The importance of talking to children transcends even beyond the toddler stage. Kasi diba usually parents would love to talk to children when they are still young, and as they grow older, they lose contact with the child. They don't know anymore what the child is doing, who their friends are. They are already less involved with the child's activities because the child is growing up. And as the child grows, they grow apart. But there are parents, on the other hand, who are still involved and are able to maintain daily conversations, even about simple things in life. So that's very important. So, okay, the parent would say, yes, we do talk about everyday events. But the question there is, how often? And what are you talking about? Kasi diba, yes, you are talking, but the things you talk about are, let's say, the mother nagging the child, nagging to do the homework, nagging to study, nagging to stop watching TV. So yes, we're talking, but the kind of interaction you have is very hostile for the child. So those things would really matter. So when you say we talk about everyday events or simple events, well, out of the blue, we're talking. We're able to establish contact every day. So that means that the parent is present in the child's life, diba? Kasi parental absence is not just physical absence. It could also be the lack or inadequate emotional support being provided by the parent who is there. Last year, we had this uh, training, community training for parents in Basay Samar. And there we highlighted that community training is Masayang Pamilya, diba? Mapa Kids, Masayang Pamilya for all Filipino children. And one of the things amazingly that we did there, the facilitator of the training was from Oxford University, partnering with Ateneo de Manila. So one of the things that the facilitator taught the trainers, the parent trainers, was the importance of a 5-minute 101 talk. So we call it 5-minute 101. So every day, because parents can say, I don't have time, I am busy, or it's corny to be allotting time for my kids. So there's really no pressure because the according to studies, 5 minutes, a 5-minute positive conversation with the child is already enough. And again, the kind or the tone of a conversation should be positive and supportive. So how will you know that it's positive and it's supportive? uh okay, so it it is positive and it is supportive if it is child directed or child led, meaning to say you do not impose on your child. When you ask questions, it should be open ended, like, okay, what are you going to do for this morning, or what is your schedule for this afternoon? Yes, you already know the schedule, but you're just asking your child to lead the conversation. Or in my case, because I'm dealing with toddler, um, the kind of play should be child directed. So I do not sometimes, kasi sometimes we forget, as parents we tend to again have the upper hand and know the functions of things. Like, for example, in the context of play, I would know that this teacup is for drinking tea and not for any other function. But my 3-year-old child would have, wild imagination and would, let's say, use the teacup for cooking food or for playing with something else. And then sometimes, out of the blue, while playing, I would say, no, 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 that's not how you use it. So that kind of interaction, it is not supportive. When I correct my child and say, that's not right. Again, if it is a positive and supportive child-directed kind of play, then the child will be the one deciding how to use the teacup and how to go on with the play that he or she's doing. But that's for children. But that's for younger children. For teenagers, how do you do that? Could you still continue letting your child direct the conversation? So again, yes, the child can still continue, but as a parent, with a little amount of control, you can actually place restrictions. But then again, do it in a positive and supportive way. Okay, so what does research findings say about the curriculum of the home? So we're saying here that as children grow older, the time spent in conversation with parents may decline. Yun na nga. Because children spend more time outside, spend more time with their peers than with their parents. And of course, the parents also lose interest because they're also busy with their own lives. And then when they do get to interact, which is less and less often, it is no longer in a very relaxed atmosphere, di ba? You seldom talk to your children, and when you do talk to them, it's because you're annoyed at their behavior. It's because you notice something that's not pleasing to you, or that is not um, approvable to you. So those are the kind of interactions you have with your child. So it's a very hostile kind of, family life, or it's not so conducive to be staying at home. So the more that you keep that kind of atmosphere at home, then the more that the child chooses to spend more time with peers, diba? Rather than with parents. And of course, also one of the developmental tasks of children is really uh, to make friendship, intimate relationships. So they would really naturally find their way outside of the house. But how do you bring them in and provide that kind of continued opportunity for family conversation? So again, if it is already a habit or a practice that's been going on, it wouldn't surprise your child if you would call them, hey, can you sit down? Can we have 5 minutes one-on-one, if you've been used to that? But some families, they seldom do that, diba? And when they are being called, when children are suddenly being called, they would feel scared. It's like being called to the guidance office. Kasi, what did I do? Diba? They have all this, their imaginations go wild already, and they say, what did I probably do right now that got my parents' attention? Kasi one of the things, of course, in parenting is we are more likely to pay attention to behaviors that are displeasing rather than provide attention or reinforcement, positive reinforcement or positive rewards to positive behavior. So when children get noticed, they do not sometimes appreciate the attention being given towards them because they feel that after that attention, punishment follows next. So, okay, so make it a habit, make it a practice for conversations to be part of family's normal life. And then we have here consistent emotional bond between parent and children, which is seen in expressions of affection. And of course, it renders the child more psychologically equipped to deal with the stresses and challenges of life. Like, for example, right now with the COVID-19, do you ever wonder how children view COVID from their perspective? Well, we're talking about grade schooler here. Probably they have an idea, even teenagers. We don't ask because we're saying, may buot naman ito hera. Or we would say that, they're at the right age. They are already watching it on, let's say, on Facebook or in YouTube. They hear it from the news. They hear it from their friends. So they probably know already what's COVID. And we do not offer that kind of conversation or opportunity to converse about what is probably COVID. And we probably evade asking about what stresses them the most during the quarantine, or did they ever fear about their lives, or do they ever fear about losing their loved ones? So these kind of questions will actually make children more relaxed and assured that their parents are there whenever they need them. So it makes them more psychologically equipped to deal with normal stresses, diba? And challenges of life. Okay, so other research findings pertain to role-playing techniques to be good listeners with their children and to extend meager daily dialogues into rich family conversation. So still here, we're still trying to relate to being able to develop a good family practice, diba? This is the structure of the home that we want to build, kasi that would be the foundation of the child's success in learning. So the curriculum of the home, as I've said, it's way more important than the child's innate learning ability and the family's socioeconomic status. When we're able, if the family is able to build a good structure, then any kind of storm will just pass through it and that structure would still remain intact. So one of the important things there is, again, how parents can be good listeners. So in that training that we did with parents, they were taught how to facilitate their 5-minute 101 by simply being good listeners. So when you're a good listener, you simply don't just keep quiet and let your child talk and talk. Being a good listener is being able to actively listen, um, get cues from children, and being able to reflect back what they just said. So you can summarize what the child said. You can reflect on the child's feelings. Diba? If a child talks about having a bad day, you simply don't just say, okay, diba? Or you don't just say, okay, I understand. But you also return the statement by the child and say, okay, I heard you had a bad day. Diba? By being able to use the same term used by the child would know that you are intently listening and taking on their cues. Okay. So yeah, at least spending 5 minutes each day in private conversation. So this 5 minutes, it's very special because you would really allot this 5 minutes for each child. Diba? This is not a conversation you have at the dining table. This is not a conversation you have when the child is watching TV, but something that you simply get the attention of the child and say, hey, it's time for our 5 minutes 101. So in spite of a very busy day, you can allot just 5 minutes, at least 5 minutes for the child and demonstrate how rare such moments can be. Diba? In my case, because I have a 5-year-old, I would even say that time really flies so fast because they have a small age gap. I wasn't really able to enjoy all the developmental milestones of my 5 years old. When she started schooling, I couldn't spend time to pause and just simply appreciate what she is able to achieve because I am also distracted by my other kid. So now that I am able to provide at least 5 minutes for one of for each of them. I am able to say that really, um, even 5 minutes can be demanding because you don't know what to do, especially if it's a first time. But if it becomes a habit, it becomes easy. So practice. So, for example, how can parents practice active listening and use open-ended questions? Sometimes pag nangungumusta ka and you ask your child, oh, how are you doing? Or how was school? They, out of maybe disinterested sila to answer us, they would just say, I'm okay. Or they would just say, to to stop you from asking more questions, they would simply just answer you, I'm okay, and then that's it, diba? And when they say I'm okay, it's like a dead end for the parent. You don't know anymore what to ask next. So instead of just saying or settling down with I'm okay, you can say how okay is okay. So they should be able to qualitatively describe what is okay. So when you say okay, what do you mean? The parent can ask that, right? Or which is the most or least okay part of the day. So being able to ask the right kind of questions will allow the parent to get that kind of answer from their child. So if a parent asks, are you okay? And then expect their child to answer just yes or no, it's not the child's fault, right? Because the question, are you okay, is a close-ended question and it requires only two answers, yes or no. But if you're able to ask very relevant, open-ended questions, then the child would be able to elucidate on their day-to-day lives because you're asking them the right kind of things. Okay. The next curriculum of the home is the family life, the routine of family life. Again, being able to establish a routine. So we already have a daily routine that we follow that includes the time to eat, sleep, play, work, study, or read that is involved. And this is even our body clock. We know what time we usually wake up in the morning. If we are a morning person, we know what time we go to bed at night. So this is a part of our, day-to-day lives. And sometimes we don't even notice until the day it was disrupted by COVID. Di ba? Diyan mo na lang nasabi na, okay, dapat I'm already in school, or when the pandemic was starting, or when the quarantine was starting, there were in our MHPSS, there were callers who would say that I cannot sleep at night because my body isn't tired, diba? So physically, uh your body was also adjusting to lack of work, lack of physical activity, and so sleep was difficult to induce. The second is, do you have a quiet place to study and read? So this is a different thing that requires more from the parents or from the family themselves. And do you have a family interest in hobbies, games, activities of educational value? So the routine is very important. A timeline always works well. So why do we need a routine? Well, because the daily lives of our students are disrupted. Now we need to make a structure for their lives at home. If we didn't have that kind of structure during summer, well, okay, we have an excuse. Summer is just like 2 months and it passes, and you allow your child to play whole day, watch TV whole day, relax, that's fine. But now that kind of routine or activities won't fit because of remote learning. Diba? So when we say that students come to school to learn, somehow um, that's correct. They come to school to learn, but it's not the teachers who uh, who are really the reason as to why they're learning, because students have that potential to learn, diba? What teachers provide are the structure of learning, like, okay, for Monday we are going to have reading and writing, for Tuesday we're going to have language and values education, and so on and so forth. Students simply come to school, prepared or not, to deal with whatever lessons that their teachers are going to provide to them. Now that they are at home, there is the structure is absent. They don't need to wake up at 7 and be at school at 8. Ba? They don't need to be at home by 5 and be able to finish, let's say, the homework or the research paper before bedtime because the due date is the next day. So they can simply just wave it off and say, I have the whole day to actually do those things. So the parents there now should be able to provide structure, because some students do not have initiative. Ba? Initiative is a trait that others wouldn't have without others providing structure. So a semblance of, a similarity of their normal lives will work if the parents would be able to provide that. So parents need to create a flexible routine and talk about how it's working over time. Again, children should be informed about this routine, and then an informed decision will work. Parents would be able to make an informed decision about their child's life if their child is involved in the decision making process. So you don't just provide this, okay, here are your schedule for this academic year, or for the first quarter, according to your teacher you should be doing this, doing that. So from time to time the parents should be working close to the child to monitor if that routine is working. Again, being able to monitor the progress makes learning more personalized, because this is remote learning, and it won't work similarly across children. Again, there's individual differences to consider, so each child will have a different reception towards remote learning. So uh, in between uh, in between distance learning, they can decide on what meaningful activities they're going to do. So children could decide on amount of screen time deemed acceptable because they will be spending more screen time in their online classes, in their interaction with their peers. So what for you is the acceptable amount of screen time? Is watching TV still considered screen time, or is screen time simply digital phones, iPads, tablets, and computer? Okay. The next one is, how about exercising, helping around the house, spending time with family, or playing? How are these activities going to fit in with their other academic schedules? Okay. So check-in routines can help avoid later challenges and disappointments. So what are check-ins? I'm going to give examples later. Okay. So as I've been saying a while ago, parents should be able to express affections toward children, being able to provide encouragement and support to their children, but at the same time, provide predictable boundaries or limitation for their lives. When there are boundaries, there's a structure. They don't simply go beyond what you've set for them, and encourage productive use of time and provide learning experiences as regular part of their lives. So somehow old habits die hard. So it can be challenging for parents now to impose certain measures. Of course, they can't just impose because again, decisions should be informed. Diba? Children should be able to provide consent that they're willing to engage in these things because when they are willing, learning becomes easier. So, but for parents of younger children, they can make learning part of their family routine. So if they have been used to a specific schedule or time allotted for learning, reading, studying, or coaching or mentoring, then this wouldn't be difficult for them. Um, this kind of remote learning can be quite difficult for parents who are not as involved as their counterparts. If it is their first time now to be sitting in with their children as their children do their work or as their children study, then they too will have a hard time adjusting, making learning or coaching a regular part of their lives. Okay. Next is, of course, the routine of family life. As I've said, these can be normal everyday practices. So some families, they do not have the luxury of time. Some families are struggling with their um, source of, living. Um, the families may be living at a subsistence or maybe at a poverty level. So it can be quite difficult for them to be around the house all the time. They might be away working somewhere else. So the child is just left with an older sibling to care for her or him. So wish we would know the types of hobbies and recreational activities the family enjoys, diba? And this can be associated with, again, their socioeconomic status. But then again, of course, the family can be very resilient. The family can be happy in spite of the absence of these things that we consider as recreational, a very simple activity between parent and child that they consider as a source of joy and a source of happiness for the family, then that can be considered as a recreational activity. So again, it will have a bearing on the child's readiness for learning in this, for this particular example, readiness for distance learning. So again, it matters if we are able or parents are able to create a healthful rhythm for their children's life. Healthful, again, healthful rhythm or a positive rhythm for children's lives. Okay. Next would be checking in. As I've said, I'm going to give an example of ways for parents to check in without being sounding off as imposing. So simply parents can ask, what classes do you have today? Do you have assessments? How will you spend your time? What do you need? What can I do to help? These are all um, questions that we can ask in the morning. And at the end of the day, the parents can check out by saying, how far did you get in your learning tasks today? What did you discover? What was hard? What could we do to make tomorrow better? So at least with this, the child knows that the parents are with them as far as learning is concerned. So students are still independent learners. They will not rely on their parents to understand the material. But later on, we will also discuss what could be the parents' role, diba, in implementing the course instruction or the learning materials being provided to them. But so far here, for these examples of checking in and checking out, the child would feel that the parent is there with them, is there to support and encourage them, and is always interested in what they're doing. Okay. The third curriculum of the home, or the third family practice that's part of the structure of the home, is the expectation and supervision. Again, we would know if the family prioritize schoolwork, for example, over TV and recreation, if the parent monitor the child's peer group, and if the parent can track the child's progress and personal growth. Among teachers, among educators, we have what we call Pygmalion effect. If you've heard of Pygmalion effect by uh, Bandura, he is a learning theorist, diba? No, not Bandura, Skinner. B.F. Skinner, he's a learning theorist, and he did this experiment on the Pygmalion effect. And accordingly, in the he used the example of, in a certain pedagogy, in the classroom setting, if a teacher comes into class and hold a high expectation of his or her students, then the Pygmalion effect there is the students will respond positively to the teacher and will meet the positive expectation of that particular teacher. So meaning to say, they will perform well according to the expectation of the teacher. So similarly, if a parent expects the child to do well, then there's the possibility that the child does well according to expectation, meet the expectation of the parents. But the catch there is, of course, the expectation should be realistic. It is high, but still realistic. So, meaning to say, it is within the limits of the child's learning needs and learning abilities and developmental age. Diba? So far, the things that we are discussing here pertains to parents with normal children, regular school age children. There are different needs and concerns for parents with um, children who have special needs, diba? Or children who have ASD. So or children who have, or parents who have children with disabilities. So they might have a different take on distance learning. Okay, so research findings would say that parents would set standards for their children, and these standards would determine what children view as important. So when parents always emphasize the value of education, then the child would know and understand how much it is valued in the family and will pursue that. Another here, of course, as school administrators, we do not expect parents to be full-time teachers or to be the educational experts. But somehow, because they will be the ones to implement distance learning, we are here just to create the structure, provide the materials, the curriculum, um, offer support online or remotely. It would really be the parents who will be there to supervise and monitor what the child is doing. So baka isipin natin, how will we know that it's not the parent who is doing the tasks, doing the homeworks for the child? Again, we should be clear that it is that parents should be able to develop independence and initiative for their own children. So children will own their learning still. But the challenge there is how they will know that their child is doing best. Yeah? So again, some parents, and usually in parent orientation, I will always emphasize that they should give less importance to grades, because grades or school marks, these are deceptive. Why can it be deceptive? For for a student or a child who is used to having high marks, learning might not anymore be as interesting compared to another child who exerts so much effort yet gets low grade. Sometimes because uh, of innate IQ, the child who seldom studies still gets a high mark. So that's rare, but that's possible. So instead of focusing on what the child gets at the end of a certain quarter, the parents can look at the child's attitude toward learning, because that will determine the child's success. That will determine if the child is still motivated, if the child is still interested, if the child is doing or exerting effort towards learning, rather than just looking at the grades. Sometimes parents are happy with the grade, happy, they would say happy, but would not show positive, encouragement to children, because they would say, anak, I'm happy that you got a grade of 89, but next time you can do better. So again, is this supportive? Is this a supportive parent when you say, but next time you can do better? Again, that's not positive communication. You are um, giving praises, but at the same time limiting your child's success, because you said next time you can do better. So you can just say that I'm happy with the grade that you get, and stop there, because the child will know, or will be the ones to initiate if he or she is still interested to maintain that kind of grade. So no need to set limitations and impose on children. So another parental role, of course, involves what they can provide. So in a way, these are the material things that can be um, quite demanding for parents, because this will require their family to have in-home Wi-Fi. This will require them to have a device that can access internet, and then a learning space, which can be quite difficult if you have a big family size, small uh, area at home, diba? And no space for learning. Let's say you have a very very small, let's say you only have, let's say, 30 or 20 square meters for your home, and then you have your kitchen is also your dining, or your dining is also your living room. So we have makeshift spaces therefore for learning. So now, how can the parent provide a conducive space for learning? So where the child will be less distracted. And of course, a significant time commitment. In fact, in my literature review, parents who do home-based education or remote learning would say that this is like a job for them. This is like a part-time job. They didn't expect it to be as demanding for parents to, be coaching their children or mentoring their children as they go through remote learning. So this will require a lot of their time and commitment. Okay. So another important thing in parental role and distance learning is homework. Um, for teachers, one of the things that you should be asking yourself is, will my curriculum, will it be resource based oriented or output based oriented? uh, as an educator myself, we are used to being output based oriented, because if it is output based, it's easy to assess, it's easy to give grades, di ba? But because of our circumstances right now, and it's remote learning, assessment methods can be quite difficult. For example, if you have exams and you give multiple choice questions, right now, how are you going to do that unless you have a software or an application that can that will allow you to be able to continue giving multiple choice tests? Or like, for example, if you use Moodle, it's a particular app online. If you use that, you can set the time uh, or the duration at which they can finish answering that question. So you would say, in 1 minute, my student should be done, and then the grade will eventually pop out after they have inputted their answer. So now, as a parent, what do you want to see in your child? Do you want to see the effort? Do you want to see them reading? Do you want to see them studying or working? Or do you simply want to see the output at the end of that learning? Do you want to see them having high grades? Do you want to see them being praised by their teacher, being commended for their work at the end? Or do you simply want them to pass? So again, it will depend on our perspective as parents. So now, because of distance learning, parents would really take on a primary role in their child's education. Um, when if students are in traditional face-to-face settings, it's really the teachers who take on the primary responsibility of inculcating all these lessons and inculcating all this um, learning out or expecting all these learning outcomes from the students. But now they simply are going to they still lead the child's learning, but the role is somehow secondary to what the parents can do, because the teacher can simply just provide the materials, provide the structure from a distance, um, provide assessment, but the person who would really implement this, the person who would really monitor the progress of the child, the person who would really ensure that the child is still at um, still is still able to perform the expectations of being a student, would be the parent. So their participation, their involvement, therefore, and their commitment is very important to the success of their child's distance learning. So what will they do? They will be planning for the child's educational day. They will be also involved in problem solving the learning experience. They will be implementing teacher suggested interventions. They will be managing their day-to-day routines. They can't anymore just say na Wednesday is for household chores, laundry day, or maybe Friday, I need to go to my kumare and sell all these things. They now need to adjust because they have to consider their child's schedule on top of theirs. So it's an added responsibility. Structure lesson and modify activities to align with their child's learning needs. So if this is difficult, um, if the child cannot cope with the lessons being provided, then it's also important for the parent to be able to communicate with the teacher who is creating all these modules for the child. So with the right amount of communication, we would be able to, bargain with how am I going to, implement this? At what pace is my child expected to complete, these activities, for example? So make learning more personalized. So another responsibility is being able to create, as I've said, a physical space. So it's very simple when we listen to it. They must be able to allot space. But again, if you don't have the resources, this can be quite difficult. But again, as we've said earlier, and that's the reason why I placed it first, in spite of the absence of a physical space. Yes, this is a very ideal thing if parents can provide a physical space for their children to learn and study. But if this is absent, again, the curriculum of the home can compensate. If the structure of the family life and family practices are strong, well built, then even in the absence of all this rudiment, all this physical space, web devices, etc., etc., um, the child would feel its absence or would feel inadequate, yes, but would still pursue learning. Okay. The parents can also create a digital space for the child, which involves being able to create their their email accounts if they don't have yet, being able to monitor that email account, meaning to say the parent is really the owner of that email account if the child is a minor, because we don't know the risk. We also need to implement the Safe Space Act. How are we going to protect children as they venture into the online or digital world? Parents will now uh, monitor what lessons or tasks assigned to their children. So of course, these are developmentally appropriate tasks. They also get to decide with the teacher what lessons can be prioritized based on urgency or importance. So this is how the parents can provide structure to their child's learning. Because if they see that the child is not able to uh, catch up with the lessons similar to their peers, then they can always reach out to the teacher and ask which of these things are really important. Because curriculum at school are designed according to um, lessons or importance of lessons and tasks, and there are prerequisites. The parent can just decide, I want to jump to this particular lesson because this seems more interesting for my child than this one. So no, our modules, our curriculums are designed according to steps. So you go to step 1 first before you proceed with the next step, because step 1 will as the child, I mean the skills learned from step 1 will help them to move on to higher cognitive needs. So the parents should know and should collaborate with the teacher to decide what lessons are best to prioritize. Okay, and of course working out a schedule to decide who uses the device at what time. So if they only have one cellular phone or smartphone at home, or one computer at home, it's not really much of a problem, because again, when they decide on a family routine, they would be able to decide again with the sense of urgency who should be using that gadget first, or who can use it and for how long can that person use it. So they can work out a schedule as a family. Okay, the next important thing is school or home communication. Here, we are now looking at the ability of the parent to communicate and interact with the teachers. So before, in traditional face-to-face settings, parents only interact with us, with teachers, during parent-teacher associations or parent-teacher meetings or conferences, or when it's time for them to pick up their school cards, diba? Or when it's recognition day, or when it's Christmas party. So these are limited events or school activities wherein we get to interact with the parents of our children or the caregivers of our children, the guardians. But because this is remote learning, then teachers should be exerting more effort to connect, again, to connect with the parents who would be involved. So it will work best if both the parents and teachers understand each other's expectations and stay in touch with one another regarding the child's learning habits, attitude towards school, social interactions, and academic progress. So it won't be one-sided. Parents wouldn't be blindsided by what the teacher is expecting. So it's best if both these two stakeholders will openly communicate each other's thoughts and feelings towards remote learning and the child involved. So it's really a big responsibility also for the teachers, because imagine how many parents do you need to reach out. Is your cell phone load even covered by your salary, diba? Because you will be using a lot of load, not just to message them online or email them, but also to call and text them regularly. So keeping in touch with one another. So the parents must be involved. Di na pwede ito absent laan ay ako hininga meeting, diba? Because this is the different thing. You can't anymore be absent, because if you are absent, for example, if there's an online conference, then you might be behind on the tasks or activities that your child should be doing by now. So it's very important to communicate. So how can you do that? We can, maybe we can do this, you can apply this. Maybe we can enforce parents to describe the child's study habits at home. Again, we should emphasize that they should do this truthfully as possible. Make an internal review, an internal assessment. Because usually our assessment methods, our report cards uh, will only be based on the teacher's assessment of the child's performance in certain subjects, subject areas. And then we're able to assign numerical grades to each subject area. And then they get an average, a general weighted average. So this time, because this is remote learning, and as we've said, it's really the parent who are acting as a teacher in remote learning, who's there to monitor, then maybe part of the assessment method will involve the parent reporting the child's progress. So it's an honest review or an honest observation of how the child is doing. So simple topics such as the child's willingness to do homework, what can she observe? Maybe she can give a rating, and each rating will quantify the kind of effort the child provides. Is the child reading for pleasure, or is the child reading because it's a requirement? How about televiewing? How about screen time and attitude toward learning? So these things can be done in order to be able to, create an opportunity for the teacher and the parent to talk. Because if you just say, okay, ma'am, can we talk about your child? And then you don't know what to talk about. Sometimes you are left hanging. What am I going to ask this parent? How is her day? When I know that she's having a hard time dealing with kids at home and at the same time working to feed the family. So maybe these topics can be used to, to initiate a conversation with parents. Okay. Next is knowing about parental involvement. Again, before in face-to-face setups, parents might be highly involved in their child's activities, diba? They come to school, they bring food, they share food, they join school fair or whatever. Um, but there are also parents who are not as involved as the others, diba? Who simply pay tuition fees, who simply enroll their children, and depend on the teacher or the school to provide all the learning needs of their kids. But because this is remote learning and this is new to everyone, then parental involvement should come from different levels. So number one, of course, is being able to build a strong curriculum for the home. Second is being able to communicate with parents of other children. So they're not just concerned of how their child is doing, but they would be able to track their child's progress relative to the progress of other children by keeping in touch with the parents of these kids. So they would know the peers of their child, and they would know how their child is doing relative to other kids. But of course, even if you have that kind of information, you don't use that kind of information to nag your child and say, hey, I've heard that an anak ni mana kuan amo ni nitiyagin himo. So again, you just use that kind of information to measure how well you are doing successfully with remote learning relative to other people's experiences. And again, involvement with their children's school. When you are able to communicate your concerns to the teacher, when you're able to uh, report to the teacher how well your child is doing, and you're able to give timely reports, then the school can also make informed decisions, which is of course for the welfare of your own child, for the welfare of its students. Okay. Next would be typology of parental involvement. Okay, so there are different types of parental involvement or school and family relationship. You have a parent, again, who is authoritative, who has equal levels of warmth and control. So that's a very positive parenting style. You have communicating styles that involves being able to maintain a flow of information between the parent and the school, so open communication lines. A parent who volunteers or helps at school, okay, that's one. So it's a parent leader, therefore. You have a parent who is supportive and supplementing the instruction of the school. Okay, you also appreciate that kind of parent. You have a parent who is so involved in the decision-making process of the school, and another one who is able to represent the school at the community level. So these are different levels of parental involvement. So the parents of your students do not necessarily have to be involved or being able to do all these things we've highlighted or we've mentioned, but at least be able to show that they are able to care for their own children, take care of their own children's needs, be able to report to you regularly about how the child is doing, be able to support the teacher by providing or implementing the instruction at home, and of course be able to contribute to the decision making process. So even if they only take at least 4 of the items, that would be appreciated. So that's for home-school relationship. What about that's for family involvement, parental involvement. What about family or school relationship? So families vary, and I think this is my second to the last slide. Families vary in their relationship to schools. And so schools must use different strategies to engage all families in the learning lives of their children. So the different types of families that I've listed here correspond different phases of economic development. So I have listed agricultural societies, industrial societies, and post-industrial societies. But these types of families, I think you will agree with me that all these family types exist even in modern societies. So you have distressed families right now, child-centered families, and parent-centered families. Again, each type of family will have a different outlook or view or attitude towards distance learning, and it matters. Okay, so who are distressed families? Distressed families are those living below, who are having a hard time, maybe living below minimum wage. They possess limited parenting skills, lacks social contact, have access to few models of good child rearing practices. So these are families who rely on their children for work, or in some cases for emotional comfort. Diba? It's like their child is now the parent. It's now the child, the eldest child, who is young, who is not even fit for work, is the one who's actually and taking care of the siblings. And these families usually see themselves as targets of discrimination. So because of that, when the school, for example, calls their attention or invites them to come forward or attend meetings, they sometimes feel that they're outcast, or they may feel, they may, what do you call this? They might have all these ideas about what the school wants from them. So sometimes some of these distressed families prevent their children from continuing their education. Diba? So they limit therefore their child's potential, because they would say na stop na lang pag school because school is expensive. Or you would say, if it's a female child, they might say na mag-aasawa ka man lang ani, ay wala na nila pag-eskwela, diba? Or pagtrabaho nila, etc., etc. So the school, the role of the school there is to expand the possibility for the child's development. The second one is child-centered families. Okay, this type of family, on the other hand, in industrial society, they understand now the value or importance of education for the child to become successful later in life. But they can be critical or skeptical of the school. So they might also have this, negative perception towards the school, similar to the distressed family. So in the distressed family, they feel critical in a sense that, would the school really be able to keep its promise and give my child a better life later on if he or she gets educated? But this time in child-centered families, they are skeptical in terms of, is the school providing enough for my child? I am paying this amount of tuition fee, I am spending all these resources, yet I don't believe that the school adequately develops my child's potential. Diba? So they might say that the school or the teacher is unfairly treating my child, so has favoritism or whatsoever. So they are frustrated by how the school is nurturing their children. On the other hand, these families, because they spend so much resources for this child, they're willing to actually step up for their children. So they're willing to become parent leaders. They're willing to be partners with the school and collaborate with the school. So if you have this kind of parent, then that's good for you. You can use this parent to coordinate with other parents. You can use this parent to make, or you can use this parent, you can involve this parent in making important school decisions for the children. So the effort therefore of the parent can be channeled from, being skeptical and critical, highly critical of the school, to being more what do you call this, more community oriented and parent oriented for the welfare of their own children. the last one is parent-centered families. And sometimes I also tend to be this type of parent-centered, because we are busy professionals. We value schooling in as much as child-centered families do. But because we are so absorbed by our personal lives, we do not anymore give or allot time to our children. So we are already disengaged. So somehow neglectful parenting. You love your children, you provide warmth, but you do not provide any control, any amount of control. You just provide everything, but do not withhold anything from them. So the tendency to become disengaged. So if you are disengaged, children are now detached. They are slowly detaching from you, and family conversations, the rate of family conversations start to decline because of parents being busy with their personal lives and children feeling that their parents are less involved with their lives. So, to compensate, actually, this is a kind of defense mechanism. Parents will try to provide the best for their children. So, all material resources will be provided for the child, um, with that mindset that they care for their children. In fact, yes, they do care. They hire the best teacher, they get a tutor, they provide everything, material things for the children, but their their emotional presence in their child's life is absent. So yun yung kulang. So they must be re-engaged with their children. Again, even just 5-minute 101 can do so much for this parent-centered individual, right? So this ends my topic. I have 30 minutes. I give the floor to our moderator. I have 30 minutes to entertain questions if you have any. Okay, thank you very much. Are you still there?
Okay.
No. Okay. Here you go. All
Yes.
right. So at this juncture, we will be having our Q&A. And ma'am, thank you for sharing uh, these insightful inputs. I'm sure the session has given our participants a new perspective, which they can exploit to strengthen their role as parents and as educators, and of course, as education advocates who shall be working with other parents. And so let's proceed to our Q&A. I guess Ma'am Ryle can entertain a few questions from our participants. So we're requesting all of you who are in attendance, you may type in your questions using our chat box. Okay, let's see if we've got our first questions here.
Yes. Okay, feel free to ask.
Yes, they can write now the chat box. FB participants, they can also write their questions at the comments area.
All right. So requesting once again, if you have some things in mind that you'd like to get to know more about, Ma'am Ryle. All right. Again, we're requesting our participants to hey, okay. We've got the first question here. All right, let me read to you the first one from uh, Dr. Edgar Tinasas. Sir, good afternoon. What should be the limit in giving the child to decide how best to spend their time at home? All right.
Okay, so for the first one, Sir Edgar, we discussed earlier being able to decide meaningful offline activities. So to be able to make an informed decision, we should, as a parent, be able to decide with our children how we can create a routine, a healthful rhythm for their lives at home. So we can decide how much they can spend online, um, how much they can spend online, so that the screen time is separate from the screen time they spend with their online learning. So at least you give them that time if you allow them, for example, and then give them the opportunity to make decisions on how much they can spend time for other meaningful activities. Yes, that's for the first one. For the second one, this is quite challenging because how can you facilitate learning for a child who has no parent or sibling assistance? That is so true. What if you're an only child? Or what if you have absentee parents, or if you have parents who are separated? So that is actually beyond my topic, since I'm only talking about um, role of parents in online learning. So here, it depends on how old the child is. If that child is younger, or let's say in grades 1 to 3 level, primary education, this can be quite challenging. So, of course, we would usually say that the older adult would be there to guide the child, diba? Provide assistance. But if it's a teenager, we can communicate, we can reach out as an educator. You could personalize that learning for that child and rely on the child's own skills and own initiative. So it would really also depend on the child's personality trait. If the child is conscientious, if the child is hardworking, if the child has leadership skills, then the child would be able to follow through the instruction. Mm-hmm.
All right. Okay.
What? Okay. I'm just actually reading the chat box. Dominant
Okay.
question.
They're starting to come in, and as of the moment, we've got a lot of responses coming from our participants.
Yes. Should I continue reading the question?
Okay. Here's another one. What will
Mhm.
be the remedies for parents who are always wait, it's I lost that part because the new messages keep on coming in. All right. How could be the teachers help? How could teachers help the learners ease out the burden of working? Let's
How?
say if they're working on 2 to 4 modules a day,
Oh, that's a lot.
how could the
How can the teacher?
help the learners ease out the burden of working 2 to 4 modules a day?
If you are the teacher, again, you can decide on whether you will be resource-based oriented or output-based oriented. What is the reasonable um, output you expect from your students? Kasi you can be bombarding them with a lot of activities without taking in consideration the fact that they are also handling other classes or managing other classes. So if you are in their place, we also have the tendency, because I'm also teaching in college, we also have a tendency to give a lot of requirements because of their absence in, face-to-face discussion. Kasi mas mahirap, di ba? So we believe that when we give them more assessments, we compensate from the lack of physical face-to-face interaction. So again, you should be able to decide what is reasonable um, amount of outputs and activities you will require from them, and at the same time, whether you will be more resource-based or learning oriented rather than output oriented. So there's a shift in pedagogy and shift in perspective as well.
Here's another question from Ma'am Lorelai Visayas. How can we help children in distressed family whose priority is not on schooling but on earning a living?
Yeah, so that is very difficult. And as an educator, you might have this, I know this because I'm a counselor, you might have this, what do you call this? This messianic tendency. So what is messianic tendency? In counseling, we call this savior's tendency, di ba? Like a messiah. You will feel that that it's your responsibility to save that child from that kind of family. And as much as possible, you wish that child to be in good hands. You wish for that child to be able to, attend school. Kasi nangihinayang ka kaniyang potential.
It doesn't change form. Even when it has symbols, even though the structure is secular, and it doesn't have mass form. Example, can is
Okay na. Okay, I can continue. So as
must is always not. We never say cans. Second one,
okay, so how can you, so yun, from based on your own limitations, you can provide help. Maybe you can create opportunities for the parents to know what kind of support is available for their child, if there are supports available in school, di ba? So I think that's the only thing we can do that is also beyond or within our limitations as educators, because you can't simply just get children and pay for their tuition fees and
the second one,
do all these things.
making requests. Example, can we go to the park?
All right, we're back. Okay. This question is actually something I've heard from parents who are talking about the low enrollment rate. Now, there is an idea coming from the deputy secretary herself that would it be possible to use police powers of the government to compel parents to enroll their children? As of today, we know for a fact that our enrollment is much smaller than what we had last year. So, is there something that the government can do to compel parents to have their kids enrolled?
Is there a way for us to compel the government? We always do that in UP. We always compel the government, Joe. Well, of course, I think it's not for me to answer anymore if how the government can deal with that. But I think as an institution, what we can do is to prove to parents that we are ready to actually manage remote learning, diba? Because we've said na last time it was also the first time for everyone to handle K to 12, but we were able to manage. So this is another change in curriculum, diba? Same subjects, but definitely change in curriculum, change in the way we implement the curriculum. So again, we take on the challenge and we prove to the parents that we would be able to manage and handle this in spite of remote learning. So yun talaga yung challenge, especially if it's in the private school setting. I've heard that some of the parents are complaining about additional operational cost, and so they were concerned about paying this amount of tuition fee, tapos remote learning. So they were saying na if I'm still going to pay this tuition fee, the same kind of tuition fee as the same amount, or if there is a tuition fee increase, then I might as well just pull out my child since I will be the one teaching. Kasi there is this mindset that they will be the ones providing the instruction, diba? They will be the ones teaching their children. So, iniisip nila, kung ako naman lang din, if I will be the one serving as the teacher, then there is no need, therefore, for me to enroll my child. But again, you have different roles. The parent simply supplements the material you provide and simply monitors the progress. They simply will implement it. Pero the other things will be provided, of course, by the school, who creates the assessment method, who creates the rubrics for assessment, who creates the test material, who creates the lesson plan. It would still be the teacher. So magkaiba pa rin. There is still the role of the school, but yun lang, for the success of remote learning, it's the parents who will have very essential role at this point.
All right. Here's one from Ma'am Dorcas Mejia. What could best be employed for a child who has literacy and numeracy issues and whose parents are not in a position to help out since they have little educational background as well?
Yes. Yun, kanina I'd mentioned that the curriculum of the home, it's more important than the parents' own learning, educational attainment, and even socioeconomic status. So we can assure the parents that simply they provide a best fit for the child's learning environment, and we will try to do the teachings ourselves. So I really can't imagine how you're going to do this, if you're going to do blended learning, or if you're going to do synchronous Zoom lectures. I don't know. But if it's going to be totally remote, that you give modules or you give handouts to students in advance, then you can just personalize learning. So you might have similar outcomes, learning outcomes at the end of a particular quarter, but the time they need to complete the tasks might vary. So pwede nga for all first quarter they have the same outcomes, learning outcomes, pero you don't necessarily have to enforce the same duration or time for all children, so, or for all students, kasi you're not there to monitor them physically. Unlike in a regular classroom setup that, okay, for this week we're going to do, for example, we're going to do fractions for this week, and so by next week you must have learned to do that before we move on to the next topic, which would be decimals, for example. So you can't do that. You can't track the pace of that student, and you don't know how far he or she has been learning those things, and the parents can't be there to teach. They can't afford a tutor either. So instead of, I don't know if it's possible for you in DepEd, but instead of having that very rigid schedules, and then checking on the learning outcomes on a scheduled basis, why not have the outcomes being checked rather than the output? So, okay, basta as long as pare-parehas nilang ma-attain yung ganito at this point, then that would be enough. So, they won't be graded whether or not they were the first to finish or complete. As long as they complete, then they will receive a grade. I don't know, even if in DepEd it's an issue, if a numerical grade or qualitative grade is an issue, diba? Kasi right now, assessment, I think earlier, I think in the morning you did assessment, diba, in your workshop. So I don't know if it matters to you if it's objective to give numerical grades still, or if you would settle with the pass grade. Because as long as ma-complete nila, then it would mean that they passed, diba? They were able to achieve the learning outcomes. So it would really depend on how you will structure your classroom.
Okay. And here's another question, which was just relayed to me. Ma'am, what do you think is the most challenging role of parents in distance learning? So our participant is asking us to the most or the greatest challenge for parents in distance learning.
I think it's the commitment, consistency also. Kasi we might only be interested uh, in the first few weeks, upay not months kung maiha. But how are we going to be consistent? How can we maintain the sense of commitment to be present regularly in our children's lives? Diba? So I think that's one. And being able to manage our time with our children on top of the other responsibilities that we have. Um, but these are for parents who have resources. For parents who are not well off or not as privileged as the other, I think the challenges would be being able to create that space for learning, being able to provide the added materials required for remote learning. Simply having a smartphone might not be enough. So those are real challenges that we can, empathize with. Because just thinking about additional cost for load, that's expensive. 50 pesos a day. To have internet, that's expensive. Some are living in far-flung areas. They do not have strong internet connection. So that's a big problem, diba? Not just for the parents, but even for the teachers themselves. So remote learning can really be a difficult thing. And I think also even for teachers, because I can relate that remote learning is more demanding, and it exerts more pressure than face-to-face instruction, because you have to prepare um you have to prepare a lot of things, and you do it online, so it's different. And you also don't get the cues from your students. You don't have facial expressions to read whether or not they're catching up with the lessons, or if they're still interested, and so on and so forth. So I think those are the challenges for parents.
Okay, thank you, ma'am.
Mhm.
Here's another one from Sir Joel Zartiga. Ma'am, can you share to us possible reasons that may trigger frustrations or withdrawals among our students doing their studies at home?
Mhm. um Frustration. What are frustration? Frustration in psychology, we define frustration as um, a kind of stress that you experience when there is a barrier to your goal. So you get frustrated when something impedes you or hinders you from attaining your goal. So the barriers we are saying are if you have poor internet connection, if you have um, non-supportive parents, or if you have uh, other family circumstances to deal with, problems in the family, internal problems that you have to deal with, those can actually affect the child's um, attitude towards learning, and can affect uh, their eventual continuation with the program. So pwede yon. So ano pa ba? What can
Uh,
affect? Yes, sir. What can
okay, I,
affect their frustration?
okay, ma'am. Sorry. I captured some of the questions
Okay.
also that are not yet answered. Can I flash it? I will flash it and then just answer na lang one.
Okay, Sir Joy.
One from Gina Polinis of Samar Division. How about parents from far-flung areas who have no formal schooling? How are they going to facilitate their
Facilitate.
child's learning?
So ito sir, I think this for Miss Gina, I think it's important that for this parent, you emphasize the importance of regularly communicating with the teacher in charge. Kasi in that way, the teacher can, the teacher can do a short survey so that she would know who to prioritize, diba? She can be able to allot time for this parent. It's not that you favor this kid, but you can spend more time, a little bit of more time for this child whose parents are not, or have not received any formal schooling kasi you would be able to assist. So you won't be able to do that for everyone all the time, but definitely um, you can manage your time to at least, if you are able to identify who needs it the most, then you can manage your time better. Another is for this parent to be involved with other parents, diba? Of children who are, of the same age group. Then if they are involved, if they have this, community of parents, then they can, within the limits of course, of restricted health protocols and limited mobility, they can work on their child's learning. So they can do that. So maybe we can have parent group, small core, and then work on that. Similar to kanina, I think I've answered this. What strategy would you suggest with learners who have no parents at home? Again, we will rely. This will depend on the age. If it's a younger child, like in my case, toddlers or preschoolers, this might be difficult because they would need assistance, diba? And help from older adults to be able to access the learning materials online, to be able to download them, print them, or submit them physically. But for older adults, um, maybe they can do less so without guidance, although they would still need somehow support. We will simply just rely on, their own initiative and their own personality traits to actually carry them through. If they are conscientious learners, responsible learners, if they have the leadership skills, then they would be able to press through remote learning.
Okay, next for the next slide. I don't know if this were quiz answered already.
Mm-hmm.
Sir Joy.
I am for the following questions, two questions.
Okay. What would be the best? Actually, the sample I gave you earlier, that the training for parents with the MAPA, Masayang Pamilya Kids Program, it actually involved four-piece parents. Four-piece parents are actually involved in a lot of activities involving parenting in their own community, diba? They have parent leaders. So I think DSWD as our counterpart would also be able to educate them in how they can be involved in distance learning. But definitely in terms of parenting, they are really doing their best. So in terms of the curriculum of the home, these parents are, creating a very warm, positive environment for their children. So to be able to be more involved, I think they can benefit yun, from the community that they have already created, and use that as a support group. Because at least if they know that uh, other parents are also struggling, other parents are also having hard time, then they wouldn't feel that they are alone with this struggle, that they are on their own. So at least with the support of others and the constant support also of the teacher in charge, then I think they would also be able to successfully overcome distance learning.
We have also one from the FB attendees from Sir Rico Ampere.
Mm-hmm.
Online directions are sometimes too difficult to follow. How could be a parent or learner overcome learning process?
Yes, so I think as an educator, you should be able to provide really a concrete structure that would be easy to follow through. When you say when you say structured learning talaga siya, then the modules you would give naka-identify na what are your goals, what are your objectives for this particular lesson, what are the learning outcomes you expect, how long should that child be able to spend time for a particular lesson. So the time spent should also be identified, the lesson spent, the reference materials that the child will use, the activity that the child should do. They should all be listed. You should imagine, as an educator, you should imagine putting yourself in the parent-learner situation. You wouldn't expect them to understand what you've written, so you would have to pretend and assume, if I am the parent who's going to read this module I did, or this lesson guide that I did, will I be able to understand what I want? So it should be clear, concise, and still, in spite of all these efforts you put in, still you should be able to provide the opportunity to, reach out to the parents and open the communication line between the two. Because no matter how good the course guides, or in our case in college, you have syllabi you created, still some parents wouldn't be able to understand, diba, the directions you give. So still, the best way to do that is to offer support and let parents feel that they wouldn't be judged if they ask questions or if they seek assistance.
Okay. We have the last one, ma'am. The next slide.
Okay.
Actually, it's not really a question, but it's a thought coming from Sir Van Gaspang from Hormok City.
Yes, yes.
So I think we cannot expect our parents to make the adjustments for us, especially those who cannot give technical assistance to their own children. We educators should make that
Yes.
adjustments.
Yes, just like
Thank
what
you,
I've
Sir
said.
Van.
Yes, I agree with Sir Van, just like with what we presented earlier, that we do not expect parents to be educators or program experts once the remote learning is over. But we expect them to be there to provide, a healthy routine for their family, for the children, a structure for their child's life, to be able to implement what we expect them to do so. And to report to us how the child is managing. So I think those are the tasks that we should give them, because they are still not the teacher, but um, their role is very important to the success of remote learning.
Okay, let's just have one last question here from Sir Rogelio William. What about our enrolled IPs? What additional strategies can we present to them so that they can never be left behind in this distance learning? The IPs, IP communities.
Yeah, so what additional strategies can we present to them? Do they have special programs?
We have
I
special programs for
Do you have
IP.
special programs for IPs?
Yes, ma'am. At the moment.
Yeah. Um, so do you have additional curriculum or a change in curriculum for them, or it's the same? I'm not familiar with how you
There is a separate curriculum now. So,
separate curriculum. Yes. So I think for IPs, what really works for them is if it's community based. Diba, in education, it's more community based when it is provided by a person whom they can trust, a person whom they see as an insider more than an outsider, someone who belongs to the community. So it will help if this will be implemented and monitored by someone whom they see as, a part of the group, a member of the group, an insider. So I think that's how you can do that. Um, so that it won't appear strange to them. Even if they're IPs, I don't think naman na they are not familiar with the digital platform. I think they also have mobile phones. They also know how to access the internet, although not all will have to do will know how. But I think some of them, especially the younger ones, already know how to do that. So this will only be challenging for the older adults or for the parents.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you very much. And I guess we just have one question left, Sir Joy. This time, the question is intended for our viewers. All right. All right. So, I'd like to request our viewers, our participants, to respond and answer this question. How can you describe our resource speaker this afternoon? All right. Start sending in your responses. Go to www.menti.com and use the code. All right.
Okay.
Just like we did a while ago.
Some of the participants have been asking for a copy of my presentation, so maybe I could just send it to Sir Dean, and
Yes.
DepEd could facilitate the distribution of the PowerPoint.
Thank you, ma'am.
Okay.
That is well appreciated. All right. So, requesting all our participants. Let's write our descriptions for our resource speaker this afternoon.
Maybe they are still accessing the minty.com.
Okay, so while waiting for the answers to show on our screen, I'd like to thank our resource speaker for that insightful session. We are looking forward that what we've learned from our resource persons starting this morning and from you, ma'am, will be translated into action.
Yes.
This
Thank
day
you.
has
Thank
been
you.
fruitful, and we thank you so much for your technical assistance that you have provided today. I think it ties up and puts everything in place.
Where are our participants?
All right, I'd like to request our participants to answer the question by accessing the website. This is one of the learnings that we had with the previous speaker. So they're saying they cannot access the website at the moment. There is no space for the responses. I will just read the comments which are being sent by means of our chat box. Very knowledgeable, brilliant, full of wisdom, well versed, amazing, brilliant, fluent speaker, insightful, excellent. Hindi pala nag-work yung page.
Let's try another one.
Superb. Okay, Sir Joy, shall we try that again? Awesome. Calm. Okay. Beautiful and passionate. Articulate. Witty. Convincing. All right. We've got a lot of adjectives here. Thank you so much for your responses. And again, as shall we try it again, Sir Joy? No more. Okay. Okay. Thank you so much. And I guess as our time is already 4:03, I would like to extend our sincerest appreciation to our speaker for today, Ma'am Ral. Thank you so much for.
Thank you, Sir Dean, and to everyone who participated and watched on Facebook Live.
Thank you, ma'am. And to everyone out there, thank you so much. We'll see you again tomorrow for our next session. And this is the promise. Ma'am will be sending her materials, and I'll forward it to you later on. And this has been a very fruitful afternoon. Thank you so much. God bless everyone. Debate is great.
Thank you. Good luck on
Bye-bye.
your next webinar.
Thank you, ma'am. See you again in the near future. Thank you po.